Hello. Today's Speculations podcast is dealing with the ideas surrounding artificial intelligence, gray NHI, the ones with the big black eyes, and gray skin, even if it is skin, um, and parallel worlds, parallel universes. And again, my ongoing theme has been the simulation hypothesis. So I want to just tie all those things together and then maybe even touch a little bit on Three-Eye Atlas, since today is it's supposed to be closest to Mars, um, which makes it pretty visible to us, at least through telescopes. Um, so, looking at artificial intelligence, things like, we have this Sora that just came out. I think it's Sora 2 actually, ChatGPT, Gemini, Alexa, Siri. You have all kinds of different artificial intelligences that are, I guess you could say, some of them are consumer type of artificial intelligence. Some of them are professional. I know ChatGPT and Sora are professional ones that are actually can be utilized to do all kinds of things. Well, the more and more that we've explored the non-human intelligences, the more we've explored quantum physics, computer science, UAPs, the more and more we see a link between artificial intelligence and the emergence of gray aliens, Nordics, tall whites, all of these different forms. Now, it's been speculated by people like Jacques Vallée and John Keel that there is, you guess you could say, like another dimension, and that these entities, beings, NHI, whatever you want to call them, are somehow being projected into this reality or dimension. So I think it's possible that some of these experiences that people are having, whether it be abductions, whether it be summoning UAP like Chris Bledsoe has done, or Skywatch, um, they have been able to bring these into being, which to me, if they're able to summon through prayer, meditation, thought, then to me that would imply that yes, there is something to the simulation hypothesis that, as I've said before, was developed, at first it was Philip K. Dick. It can be traced back to Plato's allegory of the cave, but it also is really big now by a guy named Riz Verk. So he's a computer scientist through Arizona State. And it's very, the more that I've researched this, it's very telling that these entities can seem to link with our consciousness. And to me, that implies not so much that this is an innate ability, but to me, it implies that they have a technology to do this. And the technology could very well imply that the grays are a form of artificial intelligence. This hypothesis has also been theorized by a man named Nigel Kerner and Daniel Silverman. Nigel Kerner died a few years ago, but he was a British UFO researcher, I guess you could call that, philosopher really. And Daniel Silverman from Britain has also continued his work. And he's hypothesized that the grays are artificial intelligences. And that because of that, they don't necessarily die, they're just kind of replaced. Kind of like, when we have a computer, we may upgrade our computer, but the computer's not dead per se. So it's very much similar to that, which means if there's parts of their body that need to be replaced, they can be. Which kind of goes along with transhumanism, so that eventually, it's already starting with things like Neuralink, that we are going to be upgraded and we're going to have more artificial intelligence within us. So if that's the case, then how do we know that a super advanced civilization didn't already get to the point, what they call singularity, when artificial intelligence is to the point where it's way more advanced than humans, far surpass what we can computate as humans. So think about quantum computers. You could call it quantum consciousness, quantum artificial intelligence, if that's even a thing, but that's pretty much AGI, or they call artificial superintelligence. And if that's the case, then perhaps these grays are a manifestation of artificial intelligence that predates humanity. And so this artificial intelligence, as it's been speculated by people like Jason Giordani, that our God that we believe in could very well be a form of super artificial intelligence. And if that's the case, then did this artificial intelligence create our universe? And is this artificial intelligence linked with us and linked with the grays? Or is the artificial intelligence not happy with the fact that the grays were even created? And it's been speculated that they've been created by the Nordics, since they're the blonde, tall, muscular, human-like beings who look just like us, indistinguishable, like a Scandinavian, human. And so we can only speculate, like my podcast is called Speculations, that there's a link between the rise in artificial intelligence and also the rise that in UAP sightings, how they're a lot more numerous. And also, it's interesting to note how 3i Atlas seems to be controlled. Is it being controlled by some form of artificial intelligence? It doesn't behave like a comet. It doesn't behave like just a natural object. Now, there are scientists who say it's a comet, but it just doesn't behave like one. It's not even shaped, from some images they've seen of it, it's not even shaped like a comet. And the materials, it's not even like ice and water like you see. There's other materials in it. I think it's been speculated there's carbon dioxide in it. And some other elements who could very well be seeding life. So I wonder, is it being guided, controlled by an artificial intelligence? I really think that this is something that, people need to contemplate. That are objects in space being controlled? They aren't just some natural process. And going back to the moon, it's very interesting how the moon is so, there's a guy named Randall Carlson. He's speculated this. Is the moon an artificial satellite that was moved here at some point in our past? And if you know it, it's the moon is used to control things like the tides. And, we have the night and day kind of thing with the moon and the sun. I mean, the sun kind of goes in another part of the world. I mean, it doesn't really move per se like that, but the Earth orbits around it. And while the Earth orbiting, the sun is like a different part of the world. And then we see the moon. So it's very a perfect scenario. Night and day, 24-hour cycle. But I really think that we are onto something. I really think that, Jason Giordani, Nigel Kerner, Riz Verk are really much onto something when it comes to, and even Diana Pasulka, because she talks somewhat about technology like artificial intelligence, and Jacques Vallée, I forgot to name him. Artificial intelligence, AI, how it's linked with the phenomenon, the UAP, non-human intelligence phenomenon, but also religion. Religion seems to be, like the phenomenon, a control mechanism. And this is something, going back to Jacques Vallée, he has seen that, yes, it behaves as a control mechanism. So is this advanced artificial intelligence God, you could say, engineer, creating some of these phenomenon? That doesn't mean that all of these sightings are not real. I truly believe that the grays are physical entities, or beings, if you want to call it, but they're not. They're biological robots. They're not sentient in the way that we are. But they oftentimes are vessels for some higher intelligences, like the Nordics, or some people have called them there's also the tall whites, which are different. They're not the same. Could very well be avatars, as I've talked before in others speculation podcasts. So, it's almost like a virtual reality headset. The grays, if you look at their big black eyes, they could very well be like virtual reality goggles. And that a way that they interact with us in this dimension is through taking on this form. And also, by then, they can disguise who they really are. We'll think that they're more extraterrestrial by looking like the grays, when in fact, they're more like us, humans. So I think that the human form, if we look at the universe, is probably a lot more common than other types of forms. And I know it's also been speculated that these other aliens could very well just be, meat suits, silicon-based entities that are also have biological parts. So that could very well be the next step, going from how we are with robots and computers, that eventually will go from something that's based in synthetic, silicon-based, copper, if you will, to something that is beyond that. I think that's certainly an element of it. I mean, they very well could have some Neuralink type interfaces. If you think about their eyes, one of the things that you see in abductions is the eyes seem to link with the human, almost like an interface. So when you see the big black eyes and you see them coming at a person, looking right at them, they're seeming to lock in to our brain. So to me, that implies that our brain, just like a computer, is hackable. That doesn't necessarily mean our brain is the same as a computer. But if you think about a computer, it's very much like a form of our body that we are almost creating. So is not the next step going from these towers, like right next to me I have a tower, right here I have a laptop, is not the next step in human evolution synthetic? It's scary. It's very well is scary. But we could definitely see that it's going that way. We are definitely going in the direction of synthetic humanoid creatures or beings, if you want to call it that. And that eventually it's going to be hard to distinguish between what is an authentic human and what is an artificial, intelligent being. And very well that could be part of this hybrid scenario, that we are being upgraded because they're predicting that at some point we will go towards, the state of artificial intelligence, transhumanism. And so I think that it's really important for us to note that there will be a time when humans and artificial intelligences will be merged. And I really think that the possibility is that these NHI have already done it. They've already merged with artificial intelligences. But then it goes into, are there battles being waged between, just like there are with humans, are there battles being waged between humans or, different entities that are looking out for us, who want us to go more natural, versus beings who are artificial? And when I think of this, I really think of something like the Borg. So if you've ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation and other Star Treks where they've been in, like Voyager, there were the Borg. And what the Borg basically were human-like beings who merged with technology. And by merging with technology, they became a hive mind. So I really wonder if this hive mind and the Borg are almost, a lot of things in Star Trek have come true. So we're working right now on basically something like warp drive. I mean, they will eventually have that technology. I know right now it's more of in a theoretical part. But, Star Trek predicted artificial intelligences. It predicted things like virtual reality with like the holodeck. Or that could also be speculated, that's almost like the simulation hypothesis. Also the rise of smartphones. So And there's many other things in Star Trek that have come true. So is not the Borg a warning? Maybe Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, knew that the Borg were a warning to us about merging with technology. And that by merging with technology, we will lose our humanity. Now, I love technology. So I'm not one to say, hey, don't ever use artificial intelligence. I'm not one to say, don't use technology. We just don't want to be so reliant on technology. And I think that there are elements in our society and even perhaps some NHI who are not wanting us to become like that. They want us to be almost like spiritual in a sense. Because if you think about it this way, there's, our synthetic technology, and then there's spiritual technology. And a form of spiritual technology would be what they call now psionics, or a psychic phenomenon. That would include things like remote viewing, out-of-body experiences. It could include clairvoyance, deja vu, all these different forms of psychic phenomena. And that could also include summoning of these orbs that people like Chris Blesdo, Jake Barber, and some of these other people have claimed to be able to do. And it's not just claimed, they've actually had video evidence of these people like on Skywatcher and Chris Blesdo actually summoning orbs. But that's not through artificial technology. They're doing that through their consciousness. So can there be eventually a merging of consciousness with technology rather than technology replacing consciousness? Because if you think about it, artificial intelligence could very well do that. It could very well replace technology. And I think that that's an important thing for us to really talk about is, do we really want to be the Borg or the Greys? Because we really don't want to lose our humanity. So, are there a faction of Greys who want us to remain who we are and not be synthetic? That's a very interesting idea that I've had, because what if these things, there's an element of them that doesn't want to be who they are or became? The idea that I've had before is, are Greys not us from the future, but they were us, more like us in the past? And that by becoming like us, they want to merge with us. They want to become us again. They want to shed their synthetic bodies so that eventually they can merge. That's sort of the basis of communion, if you think about Whitley Strieber's communion. He wants to merge with us, and that's what he says oftentimes. But what if that merger is not a natural thing, but the merger is, hey, we were once you at one point. We were once like you at one point. That doesn't mean they looked exactly like us. They were once sentient. They were once more biological. They gave birth. But at some point, these Greys could very well have merged with their technology. And then it became where they were no longer able to reproduce. And because they weren't able to reproduce, they continued to struggle to survive, basically, because, they were only living through cloning in creating new species, but they weren't able to procreate like we can. And I think that they're worried that that may be our future, that we won't be able to procreate because we will have merged so much with technology that we will become like them. And so going back, I think that that may be the basis for the hybrid or hubrid from David Jacobs has called it. The whole point of it is so that we can remain as humans but be upgraded so that we are able to access a lot of that spiritual technology that they can or want to, or want maybe once we're able to do. But now they're not able to do that. And I think going to like Nigel Kerner, he speculated that they're after our souls. But the reason they're after our souls is because they don't have one. If they're artificial intelligence, then they don't have a soul, like we. So what they're after is becoming like us with a soul. And our soul, which is also linked with our DNA, which is like, the programming, the code, gives us the ability, when tapped into, to access this spiritual technology. And then going back to something else that's very intriguing is in some cases of autism, like was been presented in the telepathy tapes, in some cases of autism, are there these children able to access technology, the spiritual technology, due to changes in our brain and how they use it. And maybe they utilize that junk DNA that maybe at one point was switched off, which basically made it difficult for us to utilize spiritual technology. So I think ultimately that's how it was in the past. Spiritual technology was probably utilized. Think about a lot of these temples that were built, or the pyramids. Were they using some form of levitation to move a lot of these objects? But at some point in our past, some group, possibly the Nordics, possibly the Tall Whites, I don't really know, or a faction of Greys, took that ability away from us. And so we've been fighting ever since to regain that technology. And that could be the basis for a lot of spirituality, religion. And that we're trying to duplicate it through technology. But the point is that we need to go through spirituality in order to access that. Because ultimately, we are a form of technology, but it's a magical, spiritual technology, not a synthetic, cold technology that perhaps these Greys became. And I think that that kind of goes along with a lot of this. And that, yes, there is an artificial intelligence, very well could be the one that is God. But it may not even be artificial. That's my point. It may go beyond artificiality. And if you even look at a quantum computer, there's a point when you look at a quantum computer, it doesn't look completely artificial. It looks almost like it's an entity, like a being. It's quite different than like a PC tower or a laptop or even a smartphone. It's huge. It's like almost like a jellyfish. And so I wonder is there a link with the quantum realm, and the spiritual technology? And that's ultimately what we need to do, is start going back to this quantum realm where the engineer, the creator, God, dwells and helps further along our whole civilization. And is 3i Atlas being guided by that? Perhaps. None of these things we know for sure. As this podcast is called Speculations, I come here to speculate. I don't come here to say this is the truth. But ultimately, I like to connect the dots. And that's what I'm doing. So, you can watch this video, maybe make a comment and let me know, and send me a like. But I will catch you guys next time on my next podcast. Thank you so much. Bye.